The Crucible of Arkuth was not just an arena, it was a monument to domination. Hewn from black volcanic stone, its walls were lined with banners of conquered worlds, representing a civilization that had fallen to the Dominion. The crowd was a writhing ocean of alien species, scaled, feathered, and chitinous beings roaring with the same savage hunger for blood. The scent of ozone and iron hung thick in the air, mingling with the heat of plasma torches that ringed the arena floor in the center. Kneeling in the dust was Vakara of Kelnerlast, survivor of her people's resistance. Her once gleaming armor was now a ruin of scorched plates and shattered ceramic, barely clinging to her body. Her breath came in ragged gasps through cracked lips, her mind numb from exhaustion. Above her, the champion of the Dominion loomed like a mountain of muscle and hate. He was a creature bred for violence over 3 meters tall, skin black and metallic beneath the glow of bioluminescent veins. His halberd pulsed with plasma energy, its hum drowning out even the screams of the crowd. His name was Drathkor, undefeated in 100 battles. The Dominion called him the Breaker of Worlds. To Vekara, he was simply death incarnate. The announcer's voice boomed across the Colosseum, deep and cruel. Behold, the last of the Kelnari resistance faces the mercy of the Dominion. Kneel, and her end shall be swift. The crowd erupted in cheers. Vakara didn't move. Her eyes flicked up toward the sky, the endless stretch of indigo above the arena. For a fleeting heartbeat, she wished she could see her homeworld again, its twin suns setting over the crimson seas of Kelnor. But that world was gone, turned to ash under Dominion bombardment. She was all that remained. The champion raised his halberd high, plasma light cascading over her broken form. She dropped her weapon in act, not of surrender, but acceptance. If this was to be her end, she would meet it standing, not begging. She straightened her back, her gaze defiant, her body trembling. The halberd came down, and then a sound split the air. A whistle, sharp and pure, cutting through the chaos like a blade. The halberd's plasma field flickered, stuttered, and died. Sparks burst from its emitter core as the weapon clattered uselessly to the ground. The crowd fell silent. Something had entered the arena. Something fast, unseen. A shadow swept across the stands as the sun dimmed for a fraction of a second. Then, from the sky, a figure descended. He landed between Vakara and the champion with the force of a falling meteor. Dust and light burst outward, cloaking him in a halo of smoke. When it cleared, the crowd saw him, a being of flesh and metal, humanoid, but alien to them all. Across his shoulder was a sleek Wapena bow, though not of string and wood, but of polished alloy and glowing filaments. On his visor, a single insignia flickered: a primitive planet, a newly ascended species. Fragile, emotional, loud, not a threat. And yet, here stood one of them, calm, composed. Who dares interrupt the rite of conquest? He lifted his weapon slowly, the bow unfolding into a shape of elegant lethality. The arrow that formed was not physical, it was pure light, condensed into motion. Vibrating with restrained fury, the champion roared and charged. The human released. The arrow tore through the air, a streak of brilliance that shattered the sound barrier. It struck the champion square in the chest, the impact releasing a burst of kinetic and thermal energy so precise it bypassed armor and exploded internally. Drathkor's roar turned into a gurgling scream as he staggered back, steam and blood spraying from the wound. The crowd gasped in unison. The stranger lowered his weapon, standing tall in the settling dust. His voice, when it came, was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the arena. Your games are over. Vakara could only stare. A moment ago, she had been seconds from death. Now, standing before her, was a being she'd only heard about in war rumors, a human. And he had just defied the Dominion in front of the galaxy. As the arena lights flickered and the first screams of panic began to echo through the stands, Vakara realized one terrible, wonderful truth. The galaxy had just witnessed its first act of human defiance, and nothing would ever be the same again. His name was Lieutenant Cole Ardent, Terran Vanguard Calcine Arrow. To most of the galaxy, humans were newcomers. The Galactic Council had placed them under observation, not recognition. And yet, here was one of them standing alone in the Dominion's most sacred killing ground, defying a regime that had enslaved dozens of worlds. Cole had not come here under orders. He had been stationed near the border of the Dominion's territory, part of a humanitarian patrol fleet that intercepted distress signals and refugee transports. That's when he'd seen Itan open broadcast, a Kelnari woman sentenced to entertain the Dominion through combat. She hadn't begged, she hadn't wept. She'd faced her end with quiet defiance. That was enough. Cole rerouted his ship, dropped through orbital interdiction, and risked death by violating about 17 intergalactic laws. Because to him, and to humans like him, the sight of cruelty was not something one simply watched. It was something one stopped. Now standing between Vakara and the Dominion's champion, Cole felt the eyes of thousands upon him. His bow pulsed in his grip, its energy string crackling with barely contained force. The champion Drathkor bellowed, smoke still rising from the seared wound in his chest. His halberd sputtered, partially melted by the human's first strike. "You dare interrupt my victory, fleshling," he thundered. "You will decorate these stones with your entrails." Cole tilted his head slightly, as though considering the claim. "Let's find out." He shifted into motion. No wasted movement, no hesitation. His armor was old Terran military design, stripped of insignia, but heavily modified microthrusters in the legs. Kinetic dampeners woven through the plating, and an AI-assisted targeting system synced with his neural implant. His bow, the Vanguard MK2, was no mere weapon. It was an experimental energy projector, capable of converting habitational potential into plasma velocity. He drew again. The second arrow sang through the air. It didn't pierce. Armorit disassembled. Atoms flaring apart as the kinetic pulse shattered the molecular bonds of Drathkor's gauntlet. The halberd slipped from his grasp, embedding itself uselessly into the arena floor. The crowd erupted not in cheers, but in panic. This was not supposed to happen. No one won. Vakara still half collapsed from exhaustion, could only stare at the human who now moved like lightning incarnate. Every motion of his body was controlled, efficient. Wasn't larger or stronger than the champion, but he didn't need to be. Where the alien brute relied on raw power, human relied on precision. Cole ducked under a wild swing, activated his thrusters, and leaped into the air. For a heartbeat, he hung suspended above the chaos. Then he loosed another arrow, a glowing streak that curved mid-flight, guided by the predictive AI in his visor. Explosion didn't just burn it, forced the massive alien to his knees. Impossible. Drathkor wheezed, plasma leaking from his wounds. Cole landed lightly, dust swirling around his boots. He reached up and pressed the side of his helmet, voice transmitting on an open frequency. "This broadcast ends now." His tone was calm. The halberd reactivated, arcing with unstable plasma. He swung with all the strength of a titan. Cole didn't move backward. His left gauntlet seized the halberd's haft, redirecting its momentum. The arrow flared white. The sound that followed was not an explosion, it was silence breaking. When the light faded, Drathkor's body hit the ground, armor splitting apart, eyes blank. The arena went still. Cole stood motionless, bow still drawn, breathing steady. His visor turned toward the royal platform where the Dominion's warlord presided. The warlord demanded, voice cracking. Cole's answer came like a whisper of thunder, humanity's first warning. Then he turned away, lowering his bow. Behind him, Vakara struggled to her feet, staring in awe. The Dominion's soldiers hesitated. None dared to move. The warlord gestured frantically for the broadcast to be cut, but not before the image burned itself across every data feed in the quadrant. A human standing over the corpse of their undefeated champion. As the screens faded to static, Cole extended a hand toward the stunned Kelnari warrior. "Come on," he said, his voice soft now. "We're not Dan."
The champion's corpse still smoked on the arena floor, a mountain of charred muscle and shattered armor. The energy from Cole's final arrow had carved a crater beneath him, fissures glowing faintly with residual plasma discharge. Around them, Silence had fallen, an eerie, unnatural quiet after the thunder of battle. Tens of thousands of spectators stood frozen in their seats. Moments ago, they'd been roaring for blood. Now, they stared at the humans standing over their fallen hero, as if witnessing the death of a god. Cole didn't flinch beneath the weight of their eyes. He lowered his bow slowly, its energy string fading to nothing. For a heartbeat, the entire Colosseum seemed to hold its breath. Then a voice broke the stillness. From the royal dais above, "Cease this madness," bellowed the Rakath warlord, the Dominion's regional governor. His segmented mandibles clicked furiously, his claws digging into the throne's metal arms. "Human, you violate the sacred right of conquest. This is treason against the Dominion itself." Cole looked up, visor reflecting the alien leader's furious glare. He didn't bother raising his weapon this time. His voice, calm and level, carried across the Colosseum. "You broadcast this execution across 10 systems. Consider this your final episode." He reached toward his wrist display and pressed a single command. The massive hollow screens circling the arena flickered, distorting into static. The Dominion sigil vanished, replaced by a live feed of the warlord's shocked face. Every planet, every viewer watching the broadcast now saw their mighty leader at a loss for words. Cole's voice echoed through the feed, steady and cold. "The age of your slaughter shows is over. The galaxy doesn't need to see another life crushed for your amusement." The warlord hissed in rage. "Human, you think you can defy the Dominion. You are nothing but a primitive child of a backwater rock." Cole raised his bow, not aimed to fire, but simply to remind everyone who now held the power. "Then you'd better pray Earth never grows up." The warlord froze. He opened his mandibles to issue another command, but the broadcast cut to black. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some of the alien soldiers in the stands reached for their weapons, but none dared move first. The sight of the dead champion still fresh in their minds was enough to freeze them in place. Vakara staggered forward, her body weak from exhaustion and blood loss. The adrenaline that had kept her alive was fading fast. She stumbled, and Cole caught her by the arm before she could fall. "Easy," he said quietly. "You're safe now." She stared up at him, dazed. "Safe? You just killed their god in front of the entire sector. There's no safety left for you." Cole tilted his head slightly, his tone unshaken. "They'll come. I'll deal with it." Her gaze hardened. "You risked your world for mine." He shook his head. "No, my world doesn't know I'm here." That stunned her into silence. She realized then that he had acted entirely alone. No orders, no fleet, no backup. Just conviction. "You saw the broadcast," she murmured. "You came anyway." He nodded. "Because I've seen this before. Different world, same monsters." A faint smile touched her lips despite her pain. "You're insane. Probably," he admitted, helping her to her feet. "But alive beats dead. Let's keep it that way." Together, they turned toward the hangar gates at the far end of the Colosseum. Cole's armor emitted faint pulses of blue light as its thrusters recharged. Dominion soldiers finally began to move, hesitant, fearful, but none approached too close. As they walked, the silence began to fracture. Whispers rippled through the stands, spreading like wildfire. "Human! He's human. He killed the champion." In every voice, there was the same tone. Fear. Not the primal fear of a predator or a beast, but the fear of something unpredictable, something the Dominion couldn't understand or control. When they reached the gate, Vakara stopped and turned back. She saw the corpse of the champion, lying in the dust, the crowd too stunned to even remove it. And she saw the faces, thousands of aliens, who for the first time realized the Dominion wasn't invincible. "Maybe," she whispered, "this will mean something." Cole glanced over his shoulder. "It already does." The gate burst open with a metallic shriek. revealing a corridor lined with fleeing slaves and terrified guards. Cole led the way, his visor scanning for escape routes. Every few meters, he paused to sabotage a Dominion control panel or jam a surveillance drone. His movements were deliberate, methodical, like a man who had done this far too many times. When they reached the exit tunnel, Vakara turned to him. "You know they'll hunt you across the stars for this." He gave a dry chuckle. "They'll try." Behind them, explosions began to rumble through the Colosseum as Cole's remote charges detonated, destroying the broadcasting hub, the armory, and the Champions' quarters. By the time Dominion reinforcements arrived, there would be nothing left but rubble and questions. As they boarded a captured transport, Vakara glanced back one last time at the burning arena, the place where she had expected to die, and instead found hope. "You've changed everything," she said softly. Cole sealed the cockpit and powered up the engines. "No," he said, eyes fixed on the stars ahead. "I just reminded them what defiance looks like." The ship roared into the upper atmosphere, flames trailing behind as it broke free from the Dominion's world. And far below, in the ruins of the Crucible, the fires of rebellion began to spread. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy had seen a god fall, and the one who struck him down was human. The stars outside the viewport stretched into streaks of light as the stolen Dominion ship roared through the void. The vessel's hull still bore the claw-like insignia of the Arakath Empire, but its control deck now thrummed with Terran fingerprints, manual overrides, rewired circuits, and human ingenuity where alien arrogance had once ruled. Cole Ardent sat in the pilot's chair, his jaw tight, his armor scorched from the fight. The ship's alarm screamed warnings about hull instability and reactor strain, but he ignored them. His gloved hands moved with mechanical precision, weaving the craft through the gravitational eddies of the nebula they'd entered for cover. Every maneuver seemed impossible, yet perfectly calculated, a dance between disaster and survival. Behind him, Vakara braced herself against a bulkhead, clutching her side where a plasma fragment had burned through her armor. She was exhausted, but her eyes never left the man at the controls. "You're insane," she muttered. Cole didn't look back. "That's been said before." "By who?" "Everyone who's ever survived standing next to me." A sharp turn threw her off balance, and she grabbed the edge of his seat to steady herself. Through the viewport, a squadron of Dominion interceptors blinked into view, sleek silver daggers slicing through the darkness. Their engines flared crimson, signaling the hunt was on. "They're gaining," Vakara said. Cole flicked a switch on his armrest. "They think so." The ship jolted as he rerouted auxiliary power into the engines. Energy readings spiked across the board, warning lights flashing an angry red. He pulled up a holographic schematic, a glowing 3D model of the surrounding starfield. 3 Dominion cruisers were closing in from the rear, forming a noose. Cole smiled faintly. "They're predictable." "That's their weakness." Vakara frowned. "Predictable? They fly by doctrine, by numbers, by what works." He tapped his visor, scanning trajectories. "Humans don't." He yanked a lever, cutting the main engines. The ship suddenly dropped from hyperspeed, slamming them both forward against their restraints. The Dominion interceptors, moving faster than expected, overshot their prey. Cole reignited the thrusters, spinning the ship in a complete 180-degree turn. "What are you doing?" Vakara shouted, giving them a surprise. The human's bow unfolded from its slot beside the pilot's chair, linking wirelessly to the ship's targeting systems. He drew a glowing arrow, its energy feeding directly from the reactor. Through the glass canopy, Vakara watched in awe as the weapon pulsed with a soft blue light. "Terrifyingly beautiful. Those ships are armored," she warned. "You can't." Cole released. The arrow shot into the void, vanishing into the blackness. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, space itself seemed to twist. The arrow split mid-flight into a swarm of micro-projectiles, each guided by AI precision. They struck the interceptors simultaneously, igniting in silent bursts of blue fire. 3 Dominion ships, gone. Vakara stared, her jaw tight. That wasn't just a weapon. Cole nodded, his voice calm. No, it was a message. More blips appeared on the radar. Heavier signatures this time. Dominion cruisers, 2 frigates, an entire fleet deployed to chase a single ship. Vakara moved to the communications console, scanning encrypted signals. They're broadcasting system-wide orders. Every outpost within 100 light years is looking for us. Good, Cole said, smirking beneath his helmet. That means they're afraid. Afraid? She asked incredulously. They're sending half a fleet. He leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the starfield. You don't send half a fleet after someone who doesn't matter. The ship jolted as a plasma beam grazed the hull, the impact rattling the deck. Vakara stumbled, catching herself. We can't keep this up forever. We'll burn out before they do. Cole's fingers danced across the controls. We don't have to outrun them. We just have to disappear. He pulled up a hidden navigation marker. There. Vakara squinted at the holographic projection. That's a nebula graveyard. Thousands of derelict ships float in there. It's suicide to fly through. Perfect, he said. The Dominion fleet followed, engines burning bright. The nebula ahead loomed. The dawn after the battle arrived like a whisper over a broken world. The once great arena of Rakath lay in ruins. Its stands cracked, its pillars fallen, and its banners shredded into ribbons that fluttered weakly in the desert wind. Yet amidst the wreckage stood 2 figures. Vakara, the last warrior of her people, and Lance Corvin, the human who had changed everything. Smoke still curled from the shattered ground where the alien champion had fallen. His body had long been removed, taken by his kin under silent stares. No one dared speak a word against the human, not after what they had witnessed. The legends of Rakath spoke of gods who once hurled lightning with their hands. The crowd had seen a man do it. And worse, for their pride, he had done it not for conquest, but for mercy. Vakara limped toward him, clutching her wounded side. The crowd that had once cheered for her death now parted in reverent silence. She stopped beside Lance, her voice quiet, almost fragile. You could have left, she said. You owed us nothing, yet you stayed and fought for me. Lance was silent for a long moment, his visor cracked, his breathing ragged. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of something ancient. Because I've seen what happens when no one stands between cruelty and those it feeds on. The words sank deep into her heart. He didn't speak as a savior, nor a conqueror. He spoke like someone who had seen too much, who had stood in 1,000 ruins like this, and chosen, again and again, to protect rather than destroy. The surviving Rishkathi warriors approached cautiously. None could meet his eyes. Their champion, Drathkor, had been undefeatable, a monster who ruled by pain and fear. For decades, none had survived his challenge, but the human had ended it in less than a minute. Lance looked up at the crimson sky as the twin suns began to rise. The fight is over, he said. What you do next? That's on you. He turned to leave. But before he could, Vakara stepped in front of him, trembling but resolute. Wait, she said. You gave us back our honor. You gave me back my life. At least tell me, what are you called among your people? He hesitated, then gave a faint, weary smile. They used to call me the Arrow. The Arrow, she repeated softly. Yeah, he said, eyes distant. Because I always go where I'm needed most, and I never miss. The simplicity of it struck her like a blade to the chest. He wasn't a god. He wasn't invincible. He was human. And that made him far more terrifying. As Lance walked away, the crowd bowed their heads. Some whispered prayers, others promises. The story spread like fire, of a being who moved faster than light, who struck with the fury of storms, yet carried the gentleness of mercy. They began to call him the human arrow, the weapon of Earth that guided itself toward justice. Weeks later, the Galactic Council demanded an explanation. How could a single Terran defeat the undefeated champion of Rakath? The Rakathi ambassador said only this: he moved like gravity itself had chosen a side. Across the stars, stories began to form, of humans who did the impossible, of Terrans who defied extinction, who bled for strangers and turned hopeless wars into legend. And among them, one name was whispered more than any other: Lance Corvin, the human arrow. Back on Rakath, Vakara rebuilt what was left of her clan, but every time the wind blew through the broken arena, she could still hear the of his energy bow and see the flash of blue that tore through darkness. Children of her tribe grew up playing the arrow and the champion, pretending to draw glowing bows against imaginary monsters. None of them had seen the real thing, but all of them felt the same spark in their chests when they spoke his name, because the human arrow wasn't just a warrior. He was a reminder that one person, one heart, could bend the course of destiny. And in the archives of the Galactic Council, a new law was quietly added to the Interstellar Codex. If a human enters the arena, all challenges are to be suspended. No one protested. No one dared. In the end, the human arrow vanished, leaving no trace but whispers and awe. But among the Rakathi, when the twin suns set and the sky burns red, they still look to the horizon and say, he came from the stars not to conquer, but to remind us that courage is not born of strength. It's born of choice,